This is the PW Grosser Environmental Echo, and I'm your host today, Paul Boyce, the President and CEO of PWGC. Today we've got a couple of really great guests, especially to my right. That would be Legislator Rob Calarco from the 7th District of Suffolk County. We're really fortunate and glad to have him here. He was elected to the legislature in 2011, I believe.
That was the first time, yes.
Started your tenure in 2012. And you're now the presiding officer of the legislature, which is great to hear. I know you worked your way up from deputy presiding officer and the majority leader also, which is, impressive. And I know your district stretches from probably about Middle Island down to the South Shore, which is Fire Island over there, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, and thanks for having me. Yeah, my district's a big and unique one because it's Southwest Brookhaven Township, and I get the entire beach of Brookhaven Township, which actually takes you from the border of Islip all the way out to West Hampton.
Wow.
Much longer than people think, but it's just the beach portion. But it's an important area and certainly a vital resource to the residents to be able to have it. It's mostly parkland.
That's terrific. But let me also introduce my other guest, which is Charlie Bartha, who is a senior vice president at PWGC in our engineering group. Charlie, thanks for coming in today. You've been a guest before, and you've always got some insightful comments and a lot of good experience to share with us.
Of course, love to do this.
All right. Today we're going to be talking to Legislator Rob Calarco about a lot of different environmental aspects and challenges that the county and his district face here on Long Island. These are going to vary from wastewater topics to dredging to resiliency is always a hot one, water quality issues, what the county's doing with innovative alternative wastewater treatment systems. And something that really caught my eye recently is I saw it in the paper last week. They got a lot of money to spend on preserving some farmland, which that seemed really interesting to me. And then also, a lot of us know for listening to the news and watching TV, you can't avoid it. There's a couple $1 trillion infrastructure bill that's hopefully going to get passed real soon. We may not see that money immediately, but if it does get passed, it could mean really good things for not only Suffolk County and Long Island, but the entire region, which we're really excited to hear what Rob's thoughts are on some of that stuff. So, Rob, why don't we we'll get started on this. I know you're based in Patchogue, but you grew up in Auburn, New York. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm originally from upstate New York, and I migrated to Long Island to go to college. I went to Dowling College, played lacrosse for them, and was an avionics major to begin with, and quickly changed to political science and made a career here in Suffolk County. Was fortunate enough to land a job working for a legislator while I was still in college, finishing up at Dowling, and never left, and it's a great place to be.
Well, we're glad and lucky to have you, too. I mean, it's been a pleasure to work with you over the last couple of years and to get to know you. But the first topic we do want to touch on is something that's really near and dear to the region. It's a big issue. It's something that the county exec has been pushing real strong. It has to do with water quality, and it really pertains to wastewater. Nitrogen's been a big aspect here in Long Island in terms of affecting our water supply and the quality of our surface waters, our bays, streams, creeks, ponds, lakes. It just comes and goes in many different ways. And I know you've been a part of, the sewering of different aspects or different areas of Suffolk County. And to start with, there were 4 areas that we're looking at right now, which includes the Carls River, was the Great River, which is kind of switched over to Sayville now, Patchogue, which is your district, and Mastic Shirley. These were all targeted by the county for upgrades for wastewater improvement following the week of Superstorm Sandy. What are your thoughts on that? How do you see that all working out? We're all working to hopefully push this forward and make a real strong impact.
Yeah, listen, water is our most important resource here on the island, both for recreational purposes and for the sustainability of the island, especially sitting on top of an aquifer. We mentioned I'm from upstate New York. I always joke with people because we had sewers where I grew up, and not just in my town of Auburn, but all along the both sides of the lake. Auburn sits on the top of Lake Owasco, which is part of the Finger Lake system, because that's our drinking water system. That's our economy. That's tourism. That's such an important resource. And that is something that we need to do here in Suffolk County. And it is the most important project that we can do, is installing sewers or making the upgrades to the IA systems where we need to. But certainly along the South Shore, the coastal regions here, whether it's in the Forge River, the Connecticut River, the Patchogue River, or the Carls River, those areas need to get these sewers in place so we can take the nitrogen out before it gets into our surface waters and creates those algal blooms that are killing off the shellfish and killing off the native wetlands that help cushion the blow when those next big superstorm Sandy comes.
Rob, well said. I mean, it's something that PW Grosser or PWGC we've been working on for a while now. Charlie, you want to add to anything on that?
Well, when you look at the decline of the shellfishing, you mentioned shellfishing in the Great South Bay and Patchogue area, it's shocking. And I remember in the 70s, everybody, every teenager was raking clams. And we had some guests, some clients over to Fire Island yesterday who are from the Kansas area. And they were amazed, because I was giving them the history of how the bay has deteriorated and simply the fact that, your sewage goes into the ground, into the sole source aquifer, as you mentioned. And you were one of the people who came from outside the area, and it's amazing to see that, right? It's tough to figure.
It's something where I think that in the past we kind of overlooked it because it was such an easy solution, and nobody kind of did the long-term thought process of what it happens with the nitrogen. Yes, those sandy soils clean out the contamination in terms of bacteria, but they don't help with that nitrogen load.
Absolutely. I hate to say we're paying for the sins of the past now, but all that development back in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that's the age of the groundwater and what it travels and how long it takes to reach the bay. The stuff and how long we've been putting this stuff into the ground. It's what people don't realize. It's not like we can wave a magic wand and make it all disappear overnight. This is going to be a long-term process to clean it up. But I'm glad to see that we have the will and the initiative to undertake this and move it forward.
Yeah, these projects are the biggest expansion of sewers that Suffolk will see since Southwest Sewer District was created, and I understand that there were scandals when that district was being built, and that led to the hesitation to move forward. But we are in a place now where we need to do this for the health of our of the Great South Bay, the health of our estuaries, and to be able to have our economy move forward and people be able to stay on Long Island.
Again, well said. People don't really appreciate or understand that we live, work, and play on top of our drinking water.
Sewers are a big part of the solution, obviously, but there's other parts, and the county recently adopted the innovative alternative systems. And when I first moved to Suffolk County, which was actually to work on the Southwest Sewer District, it was 1972, 73, and I was having a new house built, and I remember the builder complaining about the health department is now requiring septic tanks, which is going to add like $1,000 to the price of the house. And it's a bigger number now with the innovative alternative systems, but it's a real solution.
It's one of the most critical parts of the equation, because sewers, while are the best treatment, are very expensive, and they're not going to be the right fit for everywhere. And so there's a lot of neighborhoods on Long Island where you're going to want those alternative systems that pull that nitrogen out. It's like a little mini sewage treatment plant in your backyard when you think about it, and it will pull that nitrogen out, treat it, but it's affordable for homeowners to install.
Right.
And we're hearing the same complaints from the home builders now about the new requirement that all new construction is going to require those IA systems in Suffolk County.
Rob, that was one of my next topics, was the innovative alternative systems for treating this stuff. So, and it's great that the county is now, pushing these and, trying to move this forward again to get some of this nitrogen out of the groundwater. Can you tell us about maybe some of the financial incentives that the county has to help homeowners with these types of systems?
Sure. So we created a grant program using some funds that are set aside out of the 0.25% sales tax monies that are used for open space and water quality and sewers. And the voters agreed to put some of these aside for these IA systems. So we're making grants available to homeowners now. And while 10 to 15,000 comes from the county, we are also, because we've been leaders in the state with this program, we've been very successful at securing state grant funds as well. So now homeowners can get up to $30,000 to offset the cost of installing these systems in their backyards. And that is really going to make it available to folks. And what we've also done is streamline the process so that people can install them when they need to. Because the reality is, nobody's replacing their septic system without a requirement to either, mostly because their system fails and they need to put a new one in. Well, if your system fails, you can't wait 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks for the county to approve your grant program. We need to turn that around for you in a day or two so that you can get that new system installed and use the IA system. So that's what we're doing now. We've made it a much more streamlined process so people can get turned around in that. So when they have that critical failure, they could get an IA system in, they can afford to put that IA system in, and that is going to benefit us all over the long term.
And how available are these systems? Are they, I don't want to say they're in stock or they're, a shelf item. I mean, they are, fairly large thing you got to put in the ground.
We have about, I think, 8 or 9 different types of systems that have been approved by the county for use. And you go to a private installer, and we have people who are now licensed. It's a specialized license under our county Department of Consumer Affairs, but now people will be able to get those. And the market is responding. And in fact, the pricing is actually starting to come down as the market is responding. These aren't new. They're new to Long Island, but they're not new. They've been around in other parts of the country. So the manufacturers are out there and ready to respond.
Who do people contact about the grant program?
So they could go to reclaimourwater.org, O-R-G, and they can fill out the full application process right there. Everything is done online, so you don't have to, print out big plans and duplicate and submit them to the health department. You can do it all right there on that internet portal through Reclaim
so then
Our Water.
A homeowner gets a check after the fact or before the fact? How does it work?
The check will actually go to your installer.
To the contractor.
So you'll go through the process and you'll tell us who you're going to utilize, and the check will go directly to the installer, so that the homeowner doesn't have to worry about that money coming in between.
And it's need-based, the amount of the grants?
Some of it is need-based. So if you have a lower income, we will pay for the cost of your design professional, which is not normally part of the grant. But it does have, at the lower end of the grants, it's available to just about anybody. And as your income level goes down, you are eligible for a little bit higher amounts.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, listen, we know things are expensive on Long Island, and just because most middle-class homeowners aren't, again, you're not going to have that extra $10,000, $15,000 laying around to put in an IA system. That's a lot of money for most households,
absolutely.
regardless of what your incomes are. So we want to make sure that those grants are available to everybody who needs it. And we're working on trying to figure out a way now to help homeowners or home buyers who are looking to buy that new home and make those affordable as well, because we know, especially right now, real estate is very expensive.
Right now it is, for sure.
Building new homes is very expensive. Lumber has gone up. Just about the price of everything has gone up. Labor is at a premium. Land's at a premium. So we want to make sure that we find a way to offset that increased cost so that new homes remain affordable for the middle class as well.
Terrific. And I know this program's only been around, say, a couple of years now, but what kind of, interest or participation have you seen? Oh,
we've seen some real high numbers. We have hundreds of systems that have already been installed, and I think over 1,000 applications that have been approved at this point in time. So we have seen some real demand, and this is despite the fact that we ran into a little challenge with the taxable status of the grants. Our comptroller decided that he needed to issue 1099s, which in effect makes that grant income that you have to report to the IRS, and makes it taxable. We, meaning most of us in the legislature and the county executive and our law department, disagreed with that opinion, and we are currently trying to get a clarity from the IRS, and we're hopeful that that will come soon. And we're pretty sure they're going to decide in our favor, and that these grants, because they go directly to the installer and not to the homeowner, are not taxable.
Excellent. Now, have you seen like one part of the county or one area of the county participate more heavily? So like the North Fork, South Fork, South Shore, North Shore, Western End, Middle?
Sure.
Or is it all over the place?
It's been really scattered throughout the county, but I would say on the East End you're seeing a little bit more, and it's not just because of the county program. Out on the East End you have a couple other things that have happened. One, they've required them sooner than we have in terms of new construction. The towns have passed their own regulations, and they also have put funds from their CPF, their Community Preservation Fund, towards the installation costs as well. So they helped offset some of the costs a little bit more at the initial front. But it is well received throughout Long Island. Well, I should say Suffolk County.
Certainly Suffolk. I know Nassau's mostly sewered, and hopefully Suffolk's going to be there one day too, and we'll have one big happy island here, huh?
Yeah, with a variety of solutions. The county has gotten away from the regional sewage treatment plant concepts, and you have proposed numerous smaller plants, which it makes it easier to site, because siting a sewage treatment plant is always a difficult thing. So that's part of the solution. These IA systems are another part of the solution. So it's great that the county's involved in that.
Yeah, you need to have that multiple solution. One of the things that I think discouraged sewage plants in the past was this idea that it would help prevent growth and dense development. And certainly Suffolk County, by and large, is a suburban county, at least in the 5 western towns. Once you get further east, you get more rural. But there's been a desire to keep us that way. And I think some of the past decisions were made on the point of, well, if you don't have sewers, you can't have that kind of density of development. And that has made some neighborhoods develop in the fashion that they are. And that's why sewers probably won't be economically viable and appropriate. And that's where those IAs become that alternative solution.
And it's even possible, certainly, with these systems now, where you could have more than one home on them. You could have a block, which
cluster
requires some other, legislation. And
we recently adopted those codes, so that's exactly where we're moving now, Charlie. So that maybe you get a subdivision that's being built, and instead of putting one new system in each house, they create one centralized location. It is actually we just approved a grant for Fire Island to do a study for the barrier island of how do we provide for wastewater treatment there. Because if you think about it, you have all those different communities, especially on the western end of Fire Island, that have a lot of density. Where is their wastewater going? Well, it goes into cesspools underneath their homes for the most part, with the exception of one community that has sewers. And those homeowners have had to actually add sand under their house to provide the distance that they need to have those systems. So we really need to start looking at it for them as well, because their wastewater, when it goes into the ground, goes back into the bay and creates the same pollution problem as you get on the mainland.
All right. Time to change gears a little bit. All right. I want to talk about dredging.
Dredging.
All right. That's a county-wide issue. We are an island, right? We rely on our waterways. Recently, there's been some, little bit of controversy maybe over in the town of Islip area on the Browns River, where there was a boating accident that they're attributing possibly to be related to the lack of dredging over there. It has a lot to do with, obviously we've got to take the spoils out of these creeks, these waterways, the rivers, the canals. It's tough to find a place to put it. It's tough to find to dispose of it, depending on what's in it. And I know that the county's got, a whole highways and waterways department that has to oversee this type of stuff. What's going on? Let's just say like with the Patchogue River. That's one that I'm very familiar with. I live not too far from there. We enjoy going to dinner there and boating on the river and everything. And
yeah, listen, Patchogue River got a substantial dredging about 10 years ago, and it's been holding up fairly well for them. But I could tell you, in my district, it is an issue. We have small estuaries all along. So whether it's Mud Creek or Swan River or Abbott's Creek, there's a number of locations. And this is all along the south shore of Long Island and some North Shore ports as well that need to be dredged out. In fact, we're going to be doing a major one in Miller Place coming up pretty soon. that is one of the most difficult issues for us to deal with, because you get very limited time frames, because you
Yes.
have to work around the fish spawning seasons and the different parts of the year. So you really get about 3 months of time to do dredging on Long Island. It's not a lot of time.
And that's a big part of the problem. And another part of the problem is you touched on initially is getting rid of the dredged materials. Sometimes they have contaminants in them that you're concerned about. Other times it's just where are you going to put the material? And as the island has become more and more developed, it's been a bigger problem.
Yeah, you're right, Charlie. I mean, in my district, I have Swan River. We had to just did an emergency dredging because the winter was so tough on it that it had a shoaling that almost closed the mouth of the river off. And if you had a slightly larger boat, you were not getting through, especially at low tide.
Yep.
So we were able to luckily get a permit very, very quickly from the state and the Army Corps of Engineers and get in there and do some mechanical dredging. But we had a place to place that material. I have over in Quarry Creek, which is in Blue Point, another very heavily utilized creek that for boaters, and it is in dire need of dredging, and we have no place that we can be authorized to place those spoils, which makes it very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, so what do we do? What's the answer? How do we solve this problem, guys? I mean, it's a challenge, you know.
Well, I was involved in the permitting for the Patchogue River, as you mentioned before. What we did there is we used these geotubes, basically a very big sock that you pump the material into and add some polymers, which facilitated the dewatering of the material. And then it went, after it dried a little more, Brookhaven Town took it as alternate daily cover at the landfill. So it's a beneficial reuse is a term of art.
But you still need a place to put these really long
Yes,
tube socks
yeah.
that are probably 8-10 feet in diameter.
Yeah.
To
But
let 'em
it's
dry out a little
less
bit.
space than you need if you're going to build a dike and just pump the material in. But it still is substantial. And in that case, there was a former oil terminal site that was vacant we were able to use. So
I think this is one of those times where you have to turn to your design, your engineers, your professionals, and ask them to help come up with the creative solutions that get you through those challenges.
Oh, that's what we love to do, Rob. And we're working on an interesting. I mentioned the Browns River in the town of Islip. We're actually involved with that project, and that seems to be almost threefold. You got the county is involved because they own some of the land where some of the dredge spoils are. The town of Islip, and also the Army Corps, where the guys are going to be doing the dredging work, or overseeing it. And just the challenge of getting 3 different levels of government to kind of see eye to eye and come to an agreement on how to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, there are creative solutions. Sometimes it's not that easy to get buy-in.
Yeah, and I think that's where you gotta have you gotta take the step back, and those of us in the political world need to be able to take the step back and listen to the professionals who know what they're doing, and kind of and let them come up with those creative solutions, and be willing to try it. One of the things that I think that we don't always do so well is we're always hesitant to try something new because I don't know. I guess new is tough sometimes, but if you really want to figure out how do you get to those solutions to the difficult problems, you have to be willing to try something new once in a while.
Well, some of the new things, as Charlie mentioned, is what do we do with the stuff once it's dried out and ready to get rid of it? It's alternative cover for a landfill, or maybe it's mixing some of the organics to make a topsoil for a farm. These beneficial use determinations that the state can hand out. We've looked into that, and we're going to keep looking into those. So.
Absolutely, and listen, I think that if we could find a way to make it into a topsoil or turn it into some sort of beneficial product that you could spread on acreage for farmland, and maybe you can't put it on the vegetable farms, but maybe for horticulture you can. It would
there's a lot
be
of sod
great
farms
solution.
out east.
There's a lot of sod farms. There's a lot of money and other types of farming as well, whether it's ornamentals or other agricultural products that aren't used for food purposes.
All right, changing gears again on you. Resiliency. Superstorm Sandy, we're coming up on that anniversary again towards the end of, almost 2+ months from now. But that's, we're still reeling from some of the effects of that. I still see houses being raised and people coming up with creative ideas as to how to, make this island more resilient in terms of, It could be anything from our healthcare facilities to our wastewater treatment plants. All of this is ongoing. And I know this was a big topic for certainly your district as well as the county as a whole. Can you just tell us about some of the things maybe that Suffolk County is involved in terms of resiliencies or studies?
Sure. We right now are just about to begin work on a resiliency study for Suffolk County to really kind of look at the big picture of what we need to do to be prepared for the ever-moving targets that climate change is presenting to us. And I know there was a big report recently out of the UN about how it's just becoming a more exasperated problem, and that we're more and more seeing the inability to divert from. So we have to think about what do we need to do, whether it's along the beach and shoring up the Fire Island, shoring up the South Shore of Long Island, raising homes, but also just improving our infrastructure, whether it's bridges or simple things like culverts and water drainage. All of those things are going to need to be upgraded to be able to handle the larger water volumes and to be able to protect the South Shore more.
I mean, it's, you hit home with me. I'm a surfer. I love the beaches. I love Fire Island. I'm over there frequently. It's a great place. But, you mentioned they've got to raise the sand under their homes to put in sanitary systems. But, we're seeing sea level rise. It's coming up. I mean, it's going to take a real strong will and, unfortunately, a lot of money to address some of these things, to make these things more resilient, to keep them there for future generations. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, luckily we're in the midst of actually seeing the federal government implement the Fire Island, the Montauk plan,
Yep.
Which was something that had been talked about for, 40 years or so. And they're finally implementing some of those portions of it, which is great. We reestablished the dune line since after Sandy, and it's been holding up very well. But we do have an ongoing cost out in Montauk. We have geotubes, as Charlie mentioned earlier, but they're holding sand that are basically giant sandbags that hold back the water, and the sand in front of those bags just continue to wash away every year. And every year we're putting sand back on that beach, and it is a debate, and there's a debate at the legislature that happens every time we have to appropriate those monies of whether or not we should be hardening the structures or we should just be retreating. And that's part of the FIM plan as well, is to start that retreat process of buying out homes that are on the water, getting those people moving back, or raising those houses up. And certainly I live in the south end of Patchogue Village, and homes all around us have been going up. And the reality is I'm a block away from the water, but during Sandy I was waterfront property. And so that is something that we have to really address.
Charlie, any thoughts on resiliency?
Well, you mentioned a lot of the important factors, but you also have one of the county's biggest assets is the Bergen Point sewage treatment plant right on the shoreline. And that was
Inundated.
Designed looking at a 3.5-foot flood elevation. All the manholes in the Southwest Sewer District at 3.5-foot elevation are watertight, because that was what was projected at the time for a major flood. And you see what's happened now, so that's very big. And the county does have bridges, a number of bridges across the bays out east, and parks at the Timber Point and Indian Island, a number of shorefront parks.
Smith's Point,
that's a big one. Yeah,
some really good features.
Absolutely, and those are the types of things that we need to be looking at. And certainly, when we were lucky during Sandy, the Bergen Point held up and managed. But if you just look a little further west in Nassau County, they had a sewage treatment plant go underwater, and it was catastrophic for the whole area.
Well, these are the things we need to avoid. I'm glad that the county is taking a look and starting to plan for this now, and I'm hopeful, and maybe this leads into one of my next topics, say like this infrastructure bill, where supposedly or hopefully there's going to be trillions of dollars coming out for the entire United States. I know it's not all for Suffolk County. It'd be nice if it was. But there may be some funding opportunities there to do some really, interesting and important work in terms of resiliency. So, Rob, the infrastructure bill, what are your thoughts on that? What are your hopes for Suffolk County?
Yeah, we're excited about the infrastructure bill. We think that there's going to be a lot in there that will be helpful to Suffolk County. Senator Schumer, who's the majority leader, who's moving that bill through the Senate, has been extremely supportive. He's actually was here for a press conference about sewers and making sure the sewer money is in there. We've put about $1 billion worth of ask into sewer projects for that infrastructure bill. Certainly, we don't expect to get that all, but we are hoping to get some, and that's going to be helpful to us for our region, whether it's finishing those big projects on the four rivers that we talked about, or sewer in Kings Park, or other communities, or extending into Sayville, which is an important a place that we can extend into.
Yeah.
In fact, in Patchogue Village, the mayor is ready to double the size of his plant, and he just needs the money to be able to do it, and that will allow him to expand not just capacity in the village and connecting more homeowners in the village, but sending his pipes east and west into Bellport and Sayville to pick up other areas, other downtowns, and as well as other coastal areas that get connected to that sewer district. So those are some of the things that we're hoping to get out of it. But it's not just the sewers. We're hoping to get money for transportation.
I was going to lead into that. Yeah, certainly roads, bridges, highways. I mean, there's so much, that we could do.
There's a lot there that needs to be done. And part of what we talk about creating resiliency is also just the development that we need to do in a smart fashion that links our downtowns. And if you're going to link your downtowns, you need to have that transportation network built out. So we have a bus rapid transit system that we're looking to build on Nichols Road and Route 110 corridor, and we need those financial dollars to help us make those connections between our downtowns.
All of which ties into the environment as well. Carbon reduction, carbon footprint reduction, all that.
It does, Charlie. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have more people living in your downtowns and those areas and around transportation hubs like train stations and those BRT routes, that's fewer cars that they have to put on the road. Mm-hmm. That's less stressors that they're putting into the environmental around you, and it's less encroachment into our open spaces.
I was glad to hear that the county was asked and put in a list of what they're interested in doing, because I recall doing that and different other hopeful runs, but that's great.
I think it's all about being proactive, and we made sure that it really facilitated. And I know there was a process that was very collaborative. So we reached out to the towns, the villages, as well as the design professionals and other folks in the industry to talk about what is it that you're seeing that the needs are, so that we can pull those projects into the loop and really give them a comprehensive list of things that are on the cusp and ready to go. Because I think that's the other part of it. You need to be able to demonstrate that these projects are not pie in the sky, but are actually doable and can be implemented in the near future, and put those federal dollars to work right now.
Well, we are absolutely looking forward to it, especially as engineers and hydrogeologists and environmental scientists. We're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have been great partners all throughout.
Well, thanks, Rob. Speaking of that, I just wanted to touch on some of the projects where we got to actually know you and work with you and some of your constituents, like some surface water quality issues, like invasive species, and this is another ongoing problem for the county and maybe even the region as a whole. These invasive species, which is these, millwort and the fanwort and milfoil types of,
Sure.
Aquatic weeds, if you will. We worked together with you on Canaan Lake, which was recently completed, and I hope that the residents are satisfied and happy with the outcome.
It is a beautiful outcome, and I gotta say, it's actually one of those examples of where you gotta step back and get creative, and certainly you guys at PW Grosser were very creative in coming up with a solution, because the original plan was to dredge, and it became very apparent that wasn't really a realistic option, and we took the different course at your guidance and said, instead of dredging, drain the lake. It's a man-made lake, and dry some of that material out and move it there. And we ran into all sorts of issues with this project, but the reality is that it actually was a good demonstration project for other areas. It was extremely successful. It's very well utilized now. The lake, I stop up there quite frequently to check in and see how things are going, and it's a nice clean lake again. It's nice and clear. It's got the sandy bottom. And
I've seen and heard the same, Rob. Yeah, I've seen people out on the kayaks now, and before you couldn't even get a paddle in there with the weeds. It was just unbelievable.
You couldn't boat. You couldn't really even fish,
Yeah.
and because your lure would just get
caught
stuck.
immediately. Yeah.
And it's been a world of change for the community, and people are really flocking to the lake again and using it, which is what it was built for. It was unlike a lot of lakes on Long Island that were built to be mill lakes. You know, they were for the power that generate for lumber mills or
Yep.
lace mills, like in Patchogue. This was built as a recreational resource in the 20s.
Well, the trick now is going to be to keep it this way, and that's the hard part, because sediment's going to come in back, and the geese and the birds are going to be landing there and using it for what they use it for, and you get that organic sediment.
Yeah.
So it's just
Projects like that, everyone has to work in a partnership, and in this case, it was very difficult for the homeowners surrounding the lake, but you made the tough decision to. This is going to take time, and you're going to, go along with the engineer's recommendation, and it worked. So it was a good example of collaboration, and that took a lot of gumption for yourself to do that.
Yeah, well, listen, I was looking for the long-term solution. The last thing I wanted to do was to get nervous about how long it was going to take, and second question, and pull back and not have that solution that was going to be long term. And so by reevaluating and taking that step back, and remember when we first got in there, that stuff was supposed to dry in place, and it never did. And so we had to go and get that special machine that was basically like a big bog excavator, and it worked, and it made the piles and moved the material. Then we had to figure out where to put the material, because we couldn't cart it away as originally thought, and we built up some of those wetland areas on the shore, which have actually turned out to be really nice new access points for the community. So the community has brought out chairs and picnic tables and have taken over those areas as newfound parkland and new access points, and people are able to get into the lake and use it. And certainly the next step, the big step there is the trout is going to be stocked this fall by the DEC,
wow.
so that they'll have a little bit more fish back in the lake as well.
Outstanding. That's really good news.
Hadn't heard that.
I'll have to get a fishing license and get up there one day.
Absolutely.
Well, Rob, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do have one more topic that I mentioned to you before the start of the podcast. Saw it in the paper last week, and I thought it was an absolutely terrific initiative on the county's part. And that was, it looks like you guys have $100 million to spend on the preservation of some farmland here in Suffolk County, which we always, back to our roots, was an agricultural and a rural type of place, and I think that's absolutely terrific. Can you tell us about, what the plan is? I mean, I heard somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 10,000 acres of farmland. I mean, that's tremendous.
That's the goal. So back in, and I believe it was 1970, there was a study done by the county that said we needed to preserve 30,000 acres of agricultural use in order to preserve our agricultural industry in Suffolk County, our farming industry. And we have made a lot of good progress on that. And it was that study that created the first PDR program, the purchase of development rights. So that we would start buying those development rights, and that's how we preserve this farmland. And we've done really good between the county and the East End towns with their community preservation fund that goes towards farmland acquisition. We've preserved 20,000, but we're still coming up short of that 30,000 target. This $100 million investment that will be over the course of a number of years is intended to get those last 10,000 acres purchased and preserved, so that we make sure that farming remains a viable industry in Suffolk County. And this has got a few components to it when you think about it. First and foremost, farming is an industry. It's a business. And it's an important economic business here in Suffolk County. We're the fourth largest producer of agricultural products in the state of New York by county. And here's the real reality is, only 7-8 years ago, we were the number one producer in the state of New York. So we have started to see slippage in that production. So we want to make sure that we protect that industry and what it means for our region. And the second part of it is the environmental end of it. Preserving those acres as farmland helps preserve them for the environmental purposes that you want to have. It helps provide for that water recharge in those areas. It helps prevent that overdevelopment in those regions. And that adds to the third part of it, which is our tourism economy. At the end of the day, people who visit the East End, especially who come out from other parts of the country, they're doing it to see the bucolic beauty of our East End. And you need to preserve that agricultural component of it so that you have that bucolic beauty.
I agree. Like I said, I was really excited when I saw that in the paper, heard it on the news, and I know it's going to be a multi-year process, but I'm looking, again, something else I'm looking forward to as a county resident. So thank you, Rob. Charlie, anything you want to add to that?
I recall those kind of votes often being Western versus Eastern. Was this pretty much unanimously accepted by the legislators?
I think it will be. The proposal will be in this capital budget. We're a little delayed because of the pandemic, so the capital budget's going to happen in the next couple of months as opposed to in spring when we usually do it. But I suspect it's going to remain in there and that legislators are going to fully support it. It seems, listen, I think in this era, and certainly in this legislative body that I serve in, there's an understanding by legislators across the spectrum that there is a value to all of us to preserve our open spaces and preserve that farmland, and that it does add to everyone. So even though you may be in the town of Babylon, there is a benefit to your residents to make sure that you're buying that farmland. And there's a few last little acres in Babylon and Huntington and Islip and that need to be purchased as well.
Good. Glad to hear that.
So we can spread it around a little bit, huh?
There are still a few acres here and there, a few pocket farms that manage to resist the pressures. And those are actually as important, in my opinion, to preserve as the big couple 100-acre farm out east, because it preserves a little piece of that in those communities that otherwise would just become more developed and see more houses and it gives those folks something a little closer and easier to get to.
Sounds terrific. Well, any closing thoughts or anything you want to add before we wrap up our podcast for today, Rob?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for having me on. This has been great, and we talked about a lot of important topics. At the end of the day, all of these types of things that we're doing, if you don't have the professionals, the engineers that help you figure out how to make it happen, nothing happens. So thank you to you guys for all the work you do.
Well, we appreciate your support and the opportunity to work with you and the county on the current projects and some future projects. Charlie, any thoughts to wrap it up?
It certainly has been a pleasure to work with you and know you, and I hope you're in government for a long time.
I appreciate that, Charlie.
All right. So, I just want to thank Presiding Officer of the Suffolk County Legislature, Rob Calarco, for joining us today and spending a few minutes to give us his thoughts on some really important environmental topics to the area and the region, if you want to look at it as a whole. Also want to thank Charlie Bartha, our Senior Vice President in our engineering group at PWGC, for joining us. I did forget to mention at the beginning of this, he is a former commissioner of DPW for Suffolk County. I don't want to say it was a past life ago, but it was, a little while ago, but now he's back.
Significant portion of my life.
And it was an important part. We appreciate that. And I also want to thank our listeners for joining us today. I am, again, your host, Paul Boyce, President and CEO of PW Grosser Consulting. And this was the Environmental Echo. Again, if you guys want to reach out to us, our website address is www.pwgrosser.com/podcast. And again, thank you, listeners. We enjoyed your time.